This is Robert Stark. I'm joined here with Jim Goad. We're going to be discussing his book, The New Church Ladies, The Extremely Uptight World of Social Justice. Jim, it's great talking to you again.
Why, thank you. My pleasure to be here. Where did Adventure Kid go?
Oh, I gotta go get my food real quick.
Okay.
What?
He got, when this white racist started talking, he bolted and left. It's not my intention. Please come back. He seems like such an amiable guy.
He's a really nice guy.
Yeah. This is a very natural smile. Okay, well, should we just... Okay, he's back. All right.
Okay, so I'm also joined here with my co-host Pilleater and my guest co-host Cardtrell Payne, a.k.a. Adventure Kid.
It's nice talking to you, Jim. It's nice having Adventure Kid on, too.
Hey now. Come on, I spread joy wherever I go.
Yeah.
So, Jim, I think we did talk about this book back in the fall, and this was before it was released.
Yes.
But the book is called The New Church Ladies, and it's about this whole SJW culture. But I think there are a lot of misconceptions because I've talked about this a lot. Conservatives, when they complain about liberals, they always like to say, oh, they're moral relativist or they're nihilist. But this book makes a pretty strong case that the whole SJW culture and political correctness, basically it is a new form of religion, and you make the comparison between the church ladies who are always telling people what they can and can't say.
Yeah, they're moral absolutists more than anything, and that's why they become totalitarian. They start with the premise that everyone's equal and any disparities are caused by unfairness, and they're on a moral mission. There's nothing intellectual or logical or practical in what they believe, and they act like fanatics, the blindness of fanatics. I've really never seen anything like it. I mean, the only thing that comes close was when I was a kid. I went to Catholic school, and I had, literal church ladies there, frigid or sexually sadistic nuns who just beat the shit out of you for even mentioning sex. So that's what they remind me of. And I think it's just a factor of the left has the cultural power now, and they say power corrupts. Those are going to be the moralistic assholes. You have a lot of people who used to be the school marms on the retreat now, and they're like a little less totalitarian. Like you get Christians who aren't as evangelical as these assholes are, or at least they don't want to get up everyone's ass with everything they think and say. I've never seen anything quite like it. That things were, bad in a wholly different way when I was a kid. You couldn't talk about communism with losing and favorably without losing your job, or you couldn't have black friends or gay friends or any of that. And lesbianism, well, that was something that people suspected female librarians of doing, but you never talked about it. It was oppressive in a totally different way, but that's all they've done is switch who the sinners and saints are. They don't seem able to get past this primitive model of we're the good guys, they're the bad guys, let's kill them. And that's my main objection. But, people will say, well, it's because you hate blacks. And you get into this dead-end loop. Don't tell me what I believe. You don't know. And I have no way of proving it either way, because if I say that you're wrong, you'll just call me a denier. So much discourse online is that. Well, you're only saying that because you want to see black people. It's like, don't go for people's motives. Just say, figure out if what they're saying is true or not. And a lot of what these people are saying is not true. A lot of the disparities, I think, are more readily explained by other things than this demon idea of racism or capital, whatever the bugaboo is. But their thinking is exactly like a religious zealot. And I'm sure a lot of them hate that comparison because they think they're anti-religion. But no, your thinking is exactly the same. And I don't know, whatever the conditions of my birth was, I was always the one who just opened my mouth at hypocrites like that. I'm compelled to do it. I don't think it's really served me very well, like over the long haul, but I'm the guy who just won't shut up. No, the card trick, no, he had the card bent, and that's why I'll just see right through it. I won't shut my mouth up until I guess someone shoots me or incarcerates me or whatever. But yeah, they're religious zealots, secular religious zealots, which is even weirder. Because if you don't believe in God, then why would you even get into morality?
They've obviously gotten a lot more deranged in the last decade or so, but what were some of your first observations of this really extreme totalitarian political correctness?
Not as much totalitarian, but I know in the early '80s I still listened to punk rock somewhat, and then and when punk rock first came out in the '70s, it was just deemed to be the most horrible thing ever, which is what drew me to it. Even a band like Talking Heads, which is not considered punk rock, they had a song "Psycho Killer," and it was glorifying it. To me, it was like sociopathic music. I'm like, okay, cool. That's music.
Yeah, I mean,
That's exactly as I am.
yeah, I mean, just imagine if they had saw something like Throbbing Gristle with like the naked people and the Nazi tattoos.
But you'd look at. I just saw for the first time the Sex Pistols on Bill Grundy, and with Susie Sue there dressed up in a Nazi armband. That was just. Yeah, but like not that shit just was obliterated. It was sociopathic, and then the socials came along and cleaned house. I think one of the first things was Rock Against Racism, where it was Bernie Rhodes, who was the Clash's manager, and a couple other people. They organized that, and then they put humorless politics in this fun nihilistic music, and it never really recovered. One band, I don't like punk rock at all, but a band I've been listening to a lot lately is the Stranglers. And I just even found out that they outsold the Ramones and the Clash and the Sex Pistols combined, which is amazing to me because they never really got any coverage. But one of the reasons they didn't play Rock Against Racism. Not that they hated black people, but like, this is dumb and this is self-serving and this is self-righteous. And plus they had a tendency to beat up rock critics who gave them bad reviews. So John Savage in particular, who... he was beaten up by Jean-Jacques Brunel, the bass player. He was like a 6-degree black belt in karate, but that's why they weren't really getting much shrift in England's Dreaming, his history of punk rock. But yeah, so I first kind of caught a whiff of these assholes back around '82 when all of a sudden you saw everybody with anarchy patches and people were listening to Crass and eating vegan. And I'm like, what the hell does this have to do with punk rock? But there was a humorless to it, and there was also like a celebration of ugliness. Like if you look at a lot of those zines, like, well, let's make it more fucked up and disjointed, and it was almost this inverse morality, like where the more fucked up you were, the more saintly you were. There are people who worship Sid Vicious or Gigi Allen. It's like, well, I don't know, they seem really damaged. I'm not sure they're role models, but they just took everything and flipped it, but had the same moralistic script. So I noticed it first when anarchy and leftist politics started really being infused in punk rock, but it didn't affect me until later when I did Answer Me, and the fourth issue of Answer Me in '94, the rape issue, a college feminist took it to the local women's center, who took it to the DA, and they couldn't prosecute me because I didn't sell it personally in Washington State, but the newsstand owner who sold it faced prison time, felony promotion of pornography. And it was this disgruntled college feminist, because back then, this is when the cultural power was shifting. Because when people first heard of this, oh, you're getting popped for obscenity, oh, those fucking redneck Republicans. I'm like, nah, this is a college feminist. And she couldn't handle what was in it. I mean, if I don't like a magazine, what'll I do? I'll put it down and get another magazine. But she had this totalitarian impulse. No, these people need to be jailed. And I was just talking about this earlier tonight with somebody else. They talk about rape being about power, not sex. It's like, I think it has something to do with sex, or else there wouldn't be penises and vaginas and anuses like all the time. But who's the power freak? You can't handle someone else's different opinion. You got to put somebody behind bars for it. I think you might have the power and control issues. That's something that wouldn't even occur to me. So one thing I noticed with a lot of these assholes is they're always projecting. They're accusing other people of being fascist or totalitarian, but they're really the ones who just cannot brook any dissent. And Answer Me got all kinds of shit. And this was like mid-'90s was when OJ got acquitted. And I think that backfired on me because I got involved with a psychotic stripper, and it was a mutually violent relationship. But I was the one who tried to get out of it. I got a restraining order against her. I wound up beating her up after she bloodied my nose. After I got a restraining order, she'd attacked me 3 times over 3 weeks. I called the cops off 3 times. When she bloodied my nose, I beat the fuck out of her and went to prison for it. I honestly, to the day I die, I think that if I had been a female and I had documented all these death threats and that I had, I would never have done a day. So I think that my life has actually been seriously adversely affected by this sort of ideology. So I kind of have an axe to grind with it. Another huge thing that's in the church, the new church ladies, is my encounters with the anti-racist skinheads in Portland who would not debate. I mean, they tagged me as a Nazi, wearing an Iron Cross, very similar to the one I'm wearing right now. They would not debate it. They just physically attacked me. I fought back the first time, and the guy did not know where he was. But I was on parole. I didn't want to go to prison. Offered to box any one of them. I can take an ass kicking. They wouldn't do that, though. And again, like, so who's the totalitarian? You're physically attacking somebody over an Iron Cross? I said, if I was wearing a Flavor Flav
one you're
swap
wearing right now? I don't think it's the same one you're wearing, but it looks very similar or something.
It's exactly, this is the 1914. It's like some World War I commemorative thing. But the guy that I hit back, he went on Vice magazine. You talk about selling out to globalism. They even cut out their, they used to be somewhat interesting 10, 12 years ago. They cut out their comment section entirely. This guy that I hit back, he went on 8, 9 years ago saying it wasn't just an Iron Cross, it was a World Church of the Creator Iron Cross. I don't even know if they still exist, but this was a dumb cult in North Carolina, Rahowa, racial holy war, that Jesus and Hitler were part of the. I'm not even sure, but it's like insulting. It's like, come on, like, call me a Nazi, but don't, that's cheesy. Like, I'm insulted now. And I just went on there in the comments too. I'm like, well, hey, let's talk about it. No, I don't have nothing to talk about. I got nothing to prove. I'm like, all right, let's fight. And he blocked me, but yeah, because I'd like to actually get one of these guys trapped into a discussion. I think it'd be really obvious who had the totalitarian impulses.
Yeah, Jim
Bell, you see that with you see that with the riots in Berkeley, and you see that with the whole Richard Spencer incident of him getting attacked. It's one thing to, you can hate someone for their views, that's fine, but they actually believe that if someone's views, they are offensive, it's okay to say that they're a totally reprehensible person, and it's okay either to use violence against them or to basically try to criminalize their speech.
That's what's fascinating to me about these idiots, because their whole beef is, well, these racists or these sexists, they dehumanize other people. So what are you doing? This scumbag piece of shit, knuckle-dragging throwback, I can't wait till they all die out. It's like, sounds a little bit dehumanizing to me, guys. And I think you might be projecting your own sick tendencies just a little bit. Seems obvious to me. Not obvious to them. They're either dumb or they're deeply in denial about it. Because again, I've never seen an idea that threatened me so much I thought it had to be extinguished. Well, if it's a dumb idea, you explain why it's dumb. They think it's going to cause violence, so they do preemptive violence. It makes so little sense. It would be comical if people weren't getting hit in the head with locks and flagpoles and beaten unconscious. I mean, I said on Twitter about a month ago, I would like to return to a world where not everything is political. I don't think that's even possible these days. Maybe we're at a breaking point. Maybe there will be some relief and everybody can just go around being people again and eating food and hanging out with who they want to hang out with. Yeah. It's not all fucking civil war.
I noticed that there's really now an anti-Antifa. One thing we could be talking about the Proud Boys, or another thing. Everyone's now talking about I guess you would say, a right-wing Antifa that has fun with beating up Antifa. And now it's like this weird thing where it's like, is this really productive, or is this pretty much a civil war? Why can't people be people? And it's like from people like Base Stickman, and everybody talks about that, or even I guess Identity Europa. It's like, do you really want to be a part of that street culture that's just I call it a white people chimp out, really, because it's like, it's not Black Lives Matter per se. It's like whites in the streets protesting Black Bloc, but they are protesting for frivolous reasons because Donald Trump's president, or it's like anarchy. But then there's a whole block where it's like, well, we don't like you guys and we just want to have a street fight. And it's really strange at the moment. I don't know what to make of this anti-Antifa.
I wouldn't endorse just knocking heads although I have in the past, but the thing is, if the cops did their fucking job, you wouldn't need any of this. These guys in Portland never got arrested. It turns out their leader was a police informant who had a relative in the DA's office. And I guess that's the kind of shit that's going on in Berkeley. And if people are just getting stomped for speaking differently, then you're going to need a defense squad. That's why the Black Panthers came up. That's why the KKK came up in the 1860s.
Yep.
Destruction was brutal toward the poor whites of the South.
Let me just
yes, sir.
say something. Yeah, these Antifa, I mean, they're a bunch of pussies, basically. Like my friend Keith Preston said, these kids, they're a bunch of middle class kids. They've never been in a fight, and they think they're somehow anarchists. I have to tell you, as a guy who grew up in the hood, I could beat any of these assholes up any day of the week.
I'm pretty sure you can.
Yeah, that's the thing. My experience, said it many times. I've never really had a black person ever lecture me about white privilege. It's always a white guy who's more privileged than I am. I say, what the fuck is wrong with you? And these skinheads in Portland, these anti-racist skinheads, from what I know, a lot of them were from Lake Oswego, which is the rich area, and it's called Lake No Negroes, and because it's an all white. I mean, Portland's as white as it comes anyway, but this is just like cocaine white. And it's I shy away from trying to diagnose what motivates people, but when their behavior and their life, their life circumstances or their ideology clash so much, you have to wonder, like, why are they doing this? And projection, that's the main theme of my writing. A lot of these people really do maybe feel deserved guilt. Maybe they are descendants of slave owners or whatever. I know as far as I can tell, I'm not, or they dropped the ball somewhere along the line, because I was born a plumber's son, in a brick row home in Philly, and never had anything kicked out of my ass in 19. Anything I have, I scraped for. Nothing was given to me. So it chafes a little bit, again, like if it's a black dude from Oakland who had never met his father, I'm not going to whine to him. That's rude. It's like, well, I guess your problems are worse than mine. It's these fuckers who, as far as I can tell, never really had any problem, and are inventing them. And that was one of the themes of the Redneck book. It's like the rich whites, who actually might be the descendants of people who profited from slavery, are shitting on the poor whites, who are the descendants of indentured servants, or what were called slaves in the 1700s. It's this massive guilt projection. In a lot of cases, it's worked. I mean, propaganda is powerful. If people aren't exposed to other facts, they'll just swallow it. Some of the shit I learned about white indentured servants blew my mind. I didn't even know. I've never met either grandfather. Couldn't even tell you what their names were. I got married the first time in 1987 by Reverend Walker Goad in a trailer in Las Vegas. And I didn't even know the ethnic origin. He says it's British, and he said the first ones were convict laborers. I'm like, well, that's not what they told me. I'm supposed to be descended from slave owners and oppressors.
Yeah, well, my name is Anglo-Norman, so I think that my family was, well, the white part anyway, were a bunch of nobles who became slave owners, and somewhere down the line after the Civil War kind of lost their wealth.
Yeah, they say that doesn't, typically family wealth doesn't last past 3 generations, because the kids get soft and blow it all. I'm not sure how true that is, but yeah. But Chase, it's just like being accused of cheating and you're not getting any on the side. It's hardly anything worse than being accused of enjoying something you don't at least get the pleasure of enjoying. It's like, give me this fucking privilege, please. But that's this idea of privilege. Like, blacks in America aren't privileged relative to if they were in Nigeria, or of course they are, but you can't mention that. So I'm just fascinated being the whatever loudmouth asshole that I was born being. The picture you're painting isn't complete, or it's totally fraudulent. And something in me just, I have almost a Tourette's-like impulse to say, well, no, you got it wrong.
I've also noticed that the liberal establishment has abandoned a lot of the traditional class issues, economics, and they care more about these racial, gender, transgender issues than they do working class issues. Like a rich black lesbian would have a higher status on the SJW totem pole than like a poor white male, for instance. So that's the best example.
I think they entirely abandoned the pretense of even giving a shit about workers, because globalism will crush workers across the world. All the jobs will go to whatever Malaysian who eats scorpions will take 3 cents a day to do it. That's so fucking obvious to me, and I think that's a big reason for a lot of this anti-racist propaganda. It's to mentally condition people not to object when their livelihood is taken away and given to somebody who's much poorer. I mean, how can you be a globalist and say you're for the working class? It will crush at least the working class. It might help the working class in Malaysia, but hey, not my problem. And it doesn't help anyone who's here. There's can't speak for the blacks, but I understand there's a lot of resentment for Mexicans because not only are they taking a lot of jobs, they're ethnically cleansing blacks out of a lot of areas. I mean, Compton. I was a huge NWA fan, and Compton's like all Mexican now. I don't think people are really programmed to get along. I think it's naive and foolish to cram so many different people together and expect them to get along. And you just wonder if the people who are, engineering these policies are aware of that, or they're just stupid. And I don't know which is worse.
The other thing I've noticed is when it comes to the immigration debate, you hear liberals putting out corporate propaganda arguments to defend their position.
Yeah, well, I mean, even in the last two presidential elections, I think Trump was a little closer. I think it was and again, pulling these numbers out of my ass, I think Hillary Clinton's campaign was $1.5 billion, Trump's was $1 billion, but 2012, Obama's side outspent the Republicans 2-1. And there was some study in Mother Jones a couple of years ago, 7 out of the 10 wealthiest members of Congress are Democrats. But goddamn, they've done a great job in fooling people that they represent the poor. They don't. And, welfare, from what I've seen and people I've known who've gone on food stamps and disability, it demoralizes them. They're a shell of what they once were. It's just, I mean, the only time I ever took unemployment was about 5 years ago. I was in between jobs, and a tacky's job only pays every 3 months. And I got laid off from a square job I had on the other side of town. And, to keep the house afloat, I had to take unemployment. It's for 13 weeks, and it was $270 a week. And I'm sure I paid far more taxes into it than I ever took out. But it felt like when I cashed that check, I felt like I was eating a piece of shit. I hated it, even though it was probably my money to begin with. I don't understand the psychology of people who feel entitled to that. When Romney said the thing about the 47%, you had guys getting "I'm the 47% tattoos." You're proud that you're a fucking leech? I don't know. I don't understand you at all.
This is a weird thing because today, like you said, the globalists will say they're all for the people. When it turns out, how much have you heard of white privilege? It's whites are usually in upper middle class position. We're seeing this death of this white middle class. I remember that study, Robert. What's that study? I forget the guys' names, but they said that there's a huge rate of baby boomers, committing suicide or just dead because the white middle and lower classes are dying.
Charles Murray?
Not Charles Murray. I forgot what it was, but yeah, Murray's had coming apart. But we're seeing that it's if you're a new Eminem or some Slim Jesus, right? Some white lower class person, it's much rarer. It's much harder to live by because you think as a white person you have higher expectations, and yet at the same time you're talking about this new white nigger that takes pride in being so what is there to be in that new character? Should the white nigger take pride in this new, like you said in the Redneck Manifesto, pride in that position, or should there be more of this saving that white class, or not, really of that?
I think the people you're referencing is a male-female team of researchers, and they've come out with 2 studies, and the first one was how white suicide rates were going crazy. And then the most recent one, which I think was a month ago, is that's the whites are the only demographic whose mortality is declining. They're living, their longevity is decreasing. That's concerning.
Mm-hmm.
And who would, a lot of people are celebrating that. And typically the whites who celebrate that are the ones in upper middle class or rich that aren't really affected by it. But I think there's been a psychological mindfuck over white people over the last couple of generations where you're just fucking blamed for everything. And if you even make a peep about, well, that's not true, you get shouted the fuck down. So some people are just letting themselves be marched off into oblivion. And the thing, I mentioned this earlier to somebody else tonight too, on the one hand, oh yeah, sure, white genocide. Ooh, scary whites dying after. I don't think you have anything to worry about, guys. You're still doing great. By the way, you'll be dead in a generation and I'll be happy. It's okay, make up your mind. Either it's happening or it's not. On one hand, you're cheering it, and on the other hand, you're gaslighting somebody for saying it's even.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's a bunch of bull. They want us to all be these beige creatures with no color. I don't know if you ever seen the episode of South Park called The Goobacks, but it's exactly like that.
Huh.
Or beige power, basically.
Or who knows if that's what they want or if they actually it's engineered conflict, because historically different types of people don't get along. It's usually never assimilation or harmony. It's usually conflict until one side wins. Maybe they're total. I've still not decided whether they're too smart for their own good or they're dumb as shit and naive. Either way, it's kind of disastrous, and I'm not sure there's going to be a peaceful way out. I would hope so, but not the way the dies are being cast. I mean, it's weird to be swept up in this whole demonization thing. I think it's been a moving of the goalposts over generations. I mean, when it was first proposed to me, you see the Brady Bunch, and oh wow, look, Bobby's got a black and didn't they have? I think it was Ken Burry lived next door. They adopted a black kid and a Chinese kid. It's great, oh cool, yeah, I'm down with that. Look, he plays with toys, everything's cool, and I think most white people were fine with that. But then all of a sudden it's no, every last melanoma prone son of Yakub needs to have his head dashed against rocks. It's well, that's not what I signed on for. And this is where I'm jumping off that fucking train because you seem a little hostile toward my very existence. I mean, is it virtuous to just bend over and take that? I don't, I guess in some moral systems, Nietzsche would have said that's slave morality, to just accept, meekness and debasement and, having dimmer prospects for the future. This is the first time that's happened to white people in the U.S.
Because when I read these old books or watch old TV shows for the 50s and the 60s, which is considered to be the peak of white America, there only seems to be like the Jetsons, the cartoon. Yeah. There seems to be this optimism for the future that white people are going to have flying cars and all that other shit, and it never happened.
The year I was born, 1961, I looked up what were the top 5 TV shows. They were all westerns. Oh. And it was all this sense that the frontier is not yet closed. We're still exploring. We're still expanding. Everything since then is retreat. And I think what's happening to them psychologically is probably what happened to the Indians. It's no, but to tell the Indians, you're on the wrong side of history, that's horribly racist. But it's not racist to tell white people that. What the fuck? Like I said, ideally, but it's stupid, I think, at this point. Wish people would just lay aside the tribalism, but I think it's too ingrained in DNA. I think people are competitive and will form in groups and out groups. And probably racial ones, like they say blood is thicker than water. I think that might go a little deeper than, well, I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat, or I'm a Christian. I think blood ties like that, despite all the denial, I think that stuff might be a little bit stronger than anything else.
What are your thoughts on the libertarian ideal, where it's basically, well, you can do that thing, you could do that thing, just get the fuck off my lawn, Or is that kind of a little too radical? Do you believe in this, do what you want, or at least, or do you believe in some collective, a common good? Or is it just leave me alone versus you're bothering me right now?
I wish I could go back and find, because, online commenters are usually anonymous. Some guy on Tacky's Mag about 5 years ago said the only political divide, fuck left, right, socialist, fascist, communist, it's people who want to be left alone and people who won't leave you the hell alone. Mm-hmm. And the problem is, if there's a lot of people in the world who won't leave you the fuck alone, then you can't just be left alone. It's I've always said, the problem with being an individual is you always wind up outnumbered. You get these people who are just fucking totally tribal. I think that'd be nice, but the problem is, I think I'm gonna leave me alone. I don't want my nose up everyone else's ass. I don't care what they do. Really couldn't be bothered to get emotionally involved in any of it. But unfortunately, most people aren't like that, and they won't leave you alone. So then you have.
What influenced your politics? Because to me, you're like the William S. Burroughs or Hunter S. Thompson of this generation.
Why, thank you, sir. Actually, I could scroll way back on my Instagram. There's a picture of Burroughs a month before he croaked reading the Redneck Manifesto.
I saw that. That's pretty cool, yeah. So Burroughs did read it, yeah.
Politics, I think it's just, enough as I've read into genetics and race, I think it's pretty obvious there are physical differences. A lot of evidence there are different average levels of cognitive ability. I don't know if temperament and character can be hereditary. I think I was just born with this personality where I just, again, no, you got the picture wrong. My brother tells me the first day of grade school, the nun wrote something on the blackboard. I got up and corrected her spelling and would not sit down, and she told me to sit down. I got sent to the principal's office. I think that's my politics. Like, no, you got it wrong, and I'm not going to shut up until you get it right. But, people will tell me what my motivations are. No, it's because you feel inadequate as a white male, and you're just afraid of all the, it's like, oh, yeah. Go away. Like, because you can't really win an argument like that. Because I'll say, hey, he'll hook me up to a polygraph test. Well, those are faulty. They'll just say you're in denial. So when someone just goes for my motive, it's like, whatever you want to believe. I don't even bother to ask. But it's just this skepticism, the kind of asshole streak that I have. It's like, no, your little holy story is wrong, and here's why. And I think that's like a problem I have with like a lot of these alt-right guys are now Orthodox Christians. It's like you're just becoming the old church ladies again.
Oh yeah, they do it to me all the time. It's like a right-wing social justice warrior. I'm worried about it because I remember a time when you looked up right-wing stuff pretty offensive, like like the whole Boyd Rice thing, where it's just like, oh look, swastikas. It's like, ooh, but now it's like I understand the like good part of like, okay, it might be by common DNA thing, hang with your friend, nature says this. But now it's like the need of a new right-wing social justice warrior to say, no, you belong in a white ethno-state, you should shut up and do this. And it's really annoying, and it's becoming not me hate the alt-right, actually.
Because I remember when I was a kid, stuff that was like extreme or like fascist, people like Marilyn Manson and Throbbing Gristle and other bands like that, they would do like these extreme things, and people would like say they were crazy and stuff, but now it's like we're so used to that stuff that it doesn't even affect us even more.
Mm-hmm. I met Marilyn Manson on his tour bus before he got big. My friend Sean Partridge knew him, and we went back, and he told Sean later that I'm stuck up. That's my Marilyn Manson story. But I don't know. The problem is, like, how do you fight fanatics without getting fanatical? That's the problem. And, like, being an individual, you're going to be outnumbered. Like, maybe the only way to fucking make some of these fanatics pipe down is to have an equal fanatical death squad on the other side. And maybe it's just mutually assured destruction and everybody can calm the fuck down. I know in my case, like, when I did Anthony, I was an out-of-control rage ball. And then I got a shotgun. And I kind of thought that would make me even crazier. But no, suddenly you have the power of life and death in your hands. Really calm me down. And then, like, about 5 years ago, I started taking ninjutsu classes. And again, like, some of it was unnecessary. Like, say, if I'm at a gas station 3 in the morning and a guy in armor with a sword comes up and he's going to get my wallet. There's some things they train you about that you're really never going to have a real-life application. But knowing knowing that I knew how to take care of myself, and I knew about leverage and balance and how to take people off their feet and how to get them in a joint lock without having to, like, give them brain damage, really calm me down. So maybe if these assholes knew you're going to get hit back, they'd stop. And that'd be cool. Like, I think it's necessary to some degree. If you just have hooligans out looking to crack skulls, they're just going to fuck it up for everybody.
Yeah, what my fear is that America is starting to become like the Weimar Republic in the 1920s. I mean, we're decadent. We have two extremes fighting in the streets, like the communists versus the Nazis, and we got, like, this president who's kind of incompetent. I mean, just like Paul von Hindenburg. So what's going to happen?
I think, maybe it might be too much diversity. Tom Metzger of the White Aryan Resistance. I interviewed when I was an NWA listening wigger back in the late 80s when I had my Raiders shirt and everything. He asked me for an example of, like, a multicultural superpower. And I really couldn't think of any. Rome fall. A lot of people suggest that Rome fell apart when they started making barbarians into Roman soldiers. That a nation, when it doesn't have that common glue, it tends to fall apart. I think that might be what's happening. Again, please shoot me. I hope I'm wrong with most of this stuff. I think there might be historical precedence for that. I don't know of a place that remained vital when it was that diverse, and people, I mean, not just ideologically, but racially, linguistically, people aren't on the same page. I don't know if, like, you can function that way. What I always say is, like, liberals understand divorce. They love divorce. Like, two people, sooner or later, you just can't get along. But somehow these same morons think you can shove 7 billion people together and expect them to all get along. That's kind of naive. Even in prison, people self-segregate, but people got along better in prison than anywhere I've seen because that was respected. You had the black section, like on the left side of the chow hall, the white, the fucking hardcore Peckerwoods bikers, the Aryan guys up, the real hard guys got closest to the food, and then it filtered back. But they self-segregated, and that was considered natural. But there were hardly any fights, and that kind of fascinated me. No one was forcing everyone to get along. I got a white friend in North Carolina. He said his family came from sharecroppers, and they were on some farm system where it was like 2 black families and their family, or 2 white families. Never had a problem until Yankees came down and started like stirring up resentment. I think, unless you come and get in one person's ear, well, this person fucked you, then there wouldn't really be that much conflict. It would be a little more natural. I think a lot of this stuff is totally fabricated. And I remember like talking to black dudes in prison about my redneck book. Some of them just didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to hear there had been white slaves, but some of them like, yeah, and it's amazing how much better I get along with black people than white people. And that's been ever since like I was introduced to black people. When I was 8 years old, I went to I got in trouble at my working class brick town Catholic school, and they figured because I was too smart, so they sent me to a private academy. Kobe Bryant went there. But and that's the first time I saw black people, ironically, were these rich black kids at this private academy. And I became thick as thieves with this guy, Tiger. Leland Hardy was his name. And we got in all kinds of trouble. I remember the teacher said that Christmas was Jesus' birthday. We just busted out the happy birthday. And the teacher took us out of class and said, you're going to hell for that. And I even remember that there were 3 black kids. It was Reuben, Tiger, and some real skinny Flavor Flav looking kid. And I remember one of them saying to the other, well, that's what a black man had. And we were 8 years old. It's like 1969. And I remember thinking, why does he got to make it racial? We're just all here, like, being cool. But I remember 30 years later, I look at People magazine, this Golden Gloves boxer, Leland Hardy, he's best friends with Steve Forbes, and he owns NewYork.com. I'm like, wow, Tiger did well for himself. And I think part of this, Tiger probably had a good family. I didn't. And that plays a lot into how...
Your Answer Me was republished recently for Feral House.
No, Nine Banded Books, Chip Smith.
Oh, yeah, that's right, Nine Banded Books. Saul rewrote. Your Answer Me was recently republished for 9 Banded Books. For your rape edition, one of your articles, you actually featured Peter Sotos and Trevor Brown. Do you think Peter Sotos' Quality Time was one of the most radical for the issue?
That one was the prosecutor went after that one, and he kept going, this poor little girl. And it's like, well, guy, it's a fictional thing. It's based on Ian Brady torturing one of his victims. That and my article, Let's Hear It for Violence Against Women, which is obviously satirical, like, oh, come on, guys, like, guys really need to be encouraged. Or like it was a parody of what some feminists seem to think guys sit around talking about. Like, even in prison, I never heard anybody say, yeah, it's good to beat that bitch, or never heard. And half these guys were rapists in one of this, but I never heard them say rape is cool. It was just a reaction to like a lot of the how crazy radical feminism had gotten.
There's also a rape game too that comes with your. It's an interesting game. I've yet to play this. So.
And it's the rape game where you can play predator or prey and go through the city trying not to get raped.
Yeah, have you ever thought about rebooting your magazine and starting like another
issue 5?
Yeah, it'd be the metaphor I always use would be like like where the third bass player for the Temptations calls himself the Temptations and tours as the Temptations, or David Ruffin's New Temptations. Answer Me was 3 things, and actually kind of 4. It was me, Debbie in L.A., and the 4th variable was Nick Bougas, who supplied a lot of the gore art, did a lot of the artwork. I'm not in L.A., and Debbie's dead, so there'd be no point in doing it. I'd rather do something else. And it was a product of its time. I mean, I don't think people are any greater than I did back then, but I kind of realized it really doesn't do me any good to get as pissed off at how fucked up they are.
Yeah, that's funny. I saw a video of you. You were on like the Wally George show. And Jake and Debbie. It was funny.
Yeah, Wally George was totally in on the joke. And the thing is, I mean, they must have put Vaseline on that lens because he looked like 700. He looked like a Yeti that had been like unearthed from a crypt or something. He looked like 700 years old in public. But before that, he's like, okay, we're going to play it up. It's going to be great. And the show was called The Hot Seat. It was like a precursor of Morton Downey Jr. and some of these screaming shows. And the thing about The Hot Seat is you never lasted. The only way he'd get another guest on was to kick out the guest who was there. So we went down and we were we thought abortion should be mandatory. That was what we were not just legal, but mandatory, and got kicked off. But yeah, that was back when Anthony first started. That was kind of a rowdy crowd. It was a fun thing to do on Saturday night in the Southland in L.A. was watch Wally George at 11 p.m. on Channel 56. But we pissed off people in the crowd. We had people like chasing us by car after we got out of the studio and stuff.
How did you originally meet Peter Settis?
It was I think he might have been through Adam Parfrey, or Pete started sending me Parasite, which was a newsletter he did, and we just took it from there. Great writer, and I guess he's loved in France, kind of a pariah here. The thing that was always ironic, and I think he mentioned this in Tool, because he got arrested. I think he was the first person in America who got arrested for possession of child pornography. And it was on the second, it was from Lolly Tots magazine. I forget the origin, but on the second issue of his magazine, Pure, it was allegedly 2 fingers like spreading open the labia of a 9-year-old. But it was so crudely Xerox, it just looked like an ink blot. You would have to have somebody tell you what it was to even know what it was. But, circulation maybe 300 if you're lucky. But the night he got arrested, all 3 channels in Chicago showed the cover. So who's promoting child pornography here? Not a million people have seen it, not 300. And that's one thing that's great about him, because you would have somebody like Geraldo Rivera who would cover the same thing, but he'd make a grand display of holding his nose. But it's like, you're doing this for the titillation and because people get off on it. Pete was always...
Oh, yeah, like you have all these people like Nancy Grace, who on CNN, who I think was a prosecutor. They take this hyper-moralistic post, but they basically make a living off of covering these stories.
Just exploiting human tragedy, sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatchamacallit, a friend of mine named Martin Shrimp wanted to ask and just tell to you, Mr. Goad, that he said, quote, how did you meet with Michael Hoffman? He's been cited in the Redneck Manifesto. How much is he of influence upon your thinking?
I thought they were white and they were slaves. It was great. And as far as I know, no one's ever, all they do, because they had a big debunking of it, but all they did was, he hates Jews. And he's a great, and I think he did like a 2,000-page book on the Talmud that I haven't seen. But he also did a lot about Masons. There's a guy, okay, I'll tell this story. I've told it before, but it involves Parfrey. Very creepy story. It was July 4th, 1996. I was writing the Redneck Manifesto. I called Hoffman about 8 a.m. at his place in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And we were talking, and somehow it came up that Adam had worn a Knights of Pythias outfit in some satirical magazine in San Francisco called The Nose. And Hoffman got this really gloomy, ominous tone. He's like, Adam never should have done that. You don't insult the Masons. They will strike him. It will be decisive. It will be on a day with heavy political significance. And I'm nodding along thinking, yeah, you're nuts. 6 hours later, on July 4th, in America, it's harder to get a day with more political significance than July 4th. Adam was buying firecrackers in Vancouver, Washington, right across the river from Portland, inexplicably fell to the ground and had to be restrained by a bunch of people and was in a halfway house, went into a coma. It's never been explained, but and Adam's back to normal. But after that, I'm like, yeah, maybe you don't fuck with Masons. Maybe Hoffman knows something I'm not aware of. But I had finally met with him in person 2 years ago. I did an ebook about Idaho, and I hung out with him and his wife in Coeur d'Alene. Really nice guy. But yeah, I think he's someone like Steve Saylor. He used to be an Associated Press writer, but started realizing there's just some things you're not allowed to investigate. So that's what set him off on his path.
And there's also another question too. Another friend wanted me to pass along. A good friend of mine named James Newlick. He's also has a book on Nine Bandit Valencia, and he writes. Do you still listen to rap or hip hop music at all? And how much of your writing informs about hip hop and black culture, as I've seen that in Answer Me? I would be interested to hear his response.
I was asked this earlier tonight, and I still think a lot of the stuff from the '80s was great, and I still think, as far as like innovation, it's the only new musical format maybe in the last 50 years. When I was fascinated when it first came out. It had to be '79. I was hitchhiking, and somebody picked me up, and they had Rapper's Delight on. I'll bust you out with my super sperm. I said, "Do it." I'm like, this is the worst thing I ever heard in my life. But then, like, you hear like a couple good reviews, and Grandmaster Flash came out, and I started listening to it, and I just thought, wow, like this is a totally different way of doing like sampling, and it was, like Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon sold billions of records just because they had alarm clock sounds and stuff. But they were doing all this stuff on hip hop, right? Musique Concrète, like the Bomb Squad, the guys who produced the Public Enemy albums, or Dr. Dre. You listen to those records, there's like 7 million layers of sound on them. And the thing I liked about it back then was the lyrics were fantastic. These guys put sweat into their lyrics. And when was the last time you even heard of MCs battling? I haven't heard of that in a generation, or scratching on records or anything. I thought it was great then, but I thought it kind of died. It got dumb. It got popular. I mean, whereas it used to be like a 6,000 word lyric sheet for one song, now it's 10 words repeated 600 times. So
Yeah, and the rappers back then, they were more realistic. Like, they were really living the gang life. But I think after the 90s, people kind of steered away from the violence and everything.
I think there's kind of a revival through it. It's just a little more, you might say it's the dumb music where they repeat over. It's just a new hood style, and it's all about, Instagram, social media, who did this in jail. I mean, I'm not familiar with all the thing, but I just referenced Slim Jesus. I would consider him a new wigger for our generation. Everybody makes fun of him because he looks like Caillou, like the kids show, or Dewey from Malcolm in the Middle. But I think he's great. I think he's funny. You must have seen
the memes.
Last rapper I heard that, and it was while I was in prison, there used to be the show, you could listen to your Walkman, J-Max Super Jam thing on Sunday nights in Portland. Sugar Free from Pomona, California. Oh. He had this really weird angular style, like it was almost like a jazz musician or something. There was a boxer, Prince Nassim Hamed, he murdered people. He was like 46-0, then he lost one fight by, a decision of a Mexican, never boxed again. He reminded me of that. He would just never defend himself. He would just come at you from this weird angle. Sugar Free was like a rapper like that. His style was, and that's the last thing I heard that was kind of interesting to me, because it was, you had to be good at lyrics. And as a writer, that's what drew me to it. And back then too, what was hardcore punk? You get these Black Flag lyrics. You could put the entire lyrics in one song in a cookie, a fortune cookie rapper. Yes, well, fucking please. That's the song. These guys just will go on for 10 minutes like doing couplets. That was kind of amazing, but they don't do that anymore. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure one day I'll go back and listen to a lot of it, but I don't know. I listened to tons of country for a while. I always go back to early '70s British glam, like Gary Glitter and Sweet and Slade. I think punk rock's just a really.
Do you like avant-garde music?
Avant-garde music? I mean,
music, like Frank Zappa or The Resident.
I was a huge Residents fan. I got Eskimo when it first came out, and Meet the Residents like when I was 17, 18, 19. And yeah, I mean, the first 3 Mothers of Invention albums are great. I don't like Frank Zappa was a brilliant guy. I don't like his solo stuff because I don't like jazz too much. But the Mothers of Invention, like We're Only in It for the Money, a great album. Freak Out, probably the best one. Residents, yeah, I had all their albums up to a point. And yeah, there was I went into all this Damaged psychedelic stuff, Syd Barrett and the Shags, and I still I think the album I've listened to more than any other was the first Suicide album.
Oh yeah, Suicide's great. Love them.
Yeah, me, I like avant-garde stuff too. Like I like Maggot Brain by Parliament Funkadelic and Captain Beefheart stuff.
Yeah, Captain Beefheart I tried to get into, never, but I listened to Maggot Brain and Free Your Mind and Your Ass Will Follow, and the first Funkadelic album where they have What Is Soul. I don't know, soul is a joint rolled in toilet paper. Yeah, the thing is, people talk about Prince or George Clinton. I think the real genius was Sly Stone, though. That guy was like Mozart. He was, and I remember back in Yeadon, Pennsylvania, the Waverly Theater, like 2 miles from where I grew up, went to see the Woodstock movie in like 1978, 1979, and we called them grape lips. All these white dudes, their lips had so much weed resin that they looked like grapes. But It was funny because Sly and the Family Stone came on, who were probably the best performers at Woodstock. And, oh, nigger, nigger, nigger. Jimi Hendrix came on, everybody was just silent and in awe. I guess to them, Jimi Hendrix wasn't black. And it's weird. It's always funny to me where people draw the line. But Sly Stone was a little genius, but I think he got ruined by coke. I remember he was on the early David Letterman show when he was late night on NBC. He was obviously gacked out of his mind, and Dave's like, "So you like you like racing cars?" He's like, "Yeah, you want to race? You want to race?" He was just like out of his mind on cocaine. But yeah, I mean, yeah, there's avant-garde stuff I've listened to. I think it was mostly I was in a real fucked up place. It was around when my dad died. That's when I was listening to Suicide in the Residence and Syd Barrett. Yeah, but I got out of punk rock when all the anarchists and the vegans came in and took a turn toward rockabilly and roots music. Because then in the early '90s, I went from hip hop to old trucker music, and you listen to these got Dave Dudley and Red Sovine. It's all like dick sizing. I got a 40-foot chain and I'm hauling 20 tons. It's just like hip hop. They're trying to like get deeper with their voices, and their trucks are bigger. It's fucking hilarious. But it was like white.
David Allan Coe?
Yeah, David Allan Coe's good. I mean, he's actually a really good songwriter. Like he wrote "Would You Lay with Me in a Field of Stone" for Tanya Tucker, and yeah, but he was like, he did X-Ray, fucking in the bud, fucking in the bud, fucking in the bud. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you heard of Kevin Coyne?
Who?
Kevin Coyne. He was this British songwriter who would write like these really dark songs. You should listen to his work.
Yeah, there's your last name is Payne, Payne.
Yeah.
There's Leon Payne, and he was a blind black guy who wrote a country song in the 50s called Psycho. And if you look deep enough in Facebook, there's a video of me singing that song. But really, like, some of those country songs are more grim and creepy. Like, you listen to some Porter Wagner songs, like, nothing in punk rock compared to how demented these guys were. Psycho, basically, can Mary fry some fish? He strangles the dog, then he beats some little girl to death with a wrench in the park, and Mama, you think I'm psycho, Mama, why can't you get up? He kills his mom at the end. It's like, Jesus Christ, like I remember G.G. Allen getting this sick. But yeah, Leon Payne wrote a song called Psycho that was covered by two different guys, one in the 60s and one in the 70s.
Yeah, have you heard of a dirty blues musician called Lucille Bogan?
No. I know Bogan's like a redneck in Australia.
Yeah, she was like this female blues musician, and she wrote like this X-rated blues song in the 1930s. There's
a friend of mine, it's actually Nick Bougas, who's like, he's collected all this like really filthy blues stuff in the 30s. There's like tons of it that I don't know. But Nick's like an encyclopedia. He's got such a vast knowledge of everything. He's somebody I'd defer to. Nick, you can't stump. I'll run to him like an eager squirrel. Hey, did you hear about this? He's like, yeah, and the backstory is, and he's never a dick about it. He's always gracious, but Nick's just an amazing guy.
Whatchamacallit? I wanted to ask just another final question about this. I found it interesting, since we're talking earlier about social justice warriors and college and stuff. You went to Temple University some while back. I was also a student at Temple, and it's interesting to note that the alumni there, what I only consider to be Temple alumni, was obviously Bill Cosby, Tim and Eric from the Tim and Eric Show, Samuel R. Delany, and Ben Bova, science fiction writers. In some respect, have you ever enjoyed your experience at Temple, or do you consider it just like not really, or just do you ever have thoughts about would Temple ever accept you as Jim Goad alumni or something, or ever pay respect to that?
I mean, I liked what they taught, and even though they were avowed Marxists, they instructed you to keep that shit out of your news writing, and they taught journalism as a science, and they told me at the time it was the 6th-rated journalism school in the country.
Oh yeah, it still is.
So I was selected and there were 4 different journalism majors. One was news writing, one was magazine. I was magazine journalism, and the teachers selected me as the outstanding graduating student in that department. But they taught it like a science, and I respect that, and I think that's totally been abandoned. Like a word like racism, you couldn't get away with that because that's a meaningless. You can't measure that word. I remember we had this they gave us the facts, and you had to write the story. And there was this black kid in the news writing class who looked like Smokey Robinson, and he had like blue eyes or something. He started off as like, tragedy struck the plush suburb of Chestnut Hill. She's like, no, wait. Can't say it's a tragedy. That's an opinion. Like, they were really bare bones about it. And I respect that they taught me those things. I just hate that no journalists practice that anymore. I think we'd be much, but if it was approached like a science. Now and I mentioned this I think last week in my article for Tacky. Like people say they get into journalism to save the world. It's like that's not why you get into journalism or science. You get sure.
It's also true that Temple's in Philadelphia, and sometimes you do reference Philly. I think somewhere you said the meanest people in the world are in Philadelphia. Do you think Philadelphia is a special place, or do you think it's a living hellhole?
I think I've never been able to find the survey, but I think it was in the 90s. It was some sociology study that determined it was the most hostile city in America.
Yeah, yes.
That's been my experience. But it's like, I love Philly in the same way I like Cleveland or Baltimore. These are total shitholes. The residents are really cool because they know they're shitholes and they kind of have this self-deprecating humor about it.
Oh yeah, cheesesteaks. One of the most shittiest foods on the planet is from Philadelphia, and I love cheesesteaks.
Love cheesesteaks.
Hoagies and water ice and tasty cakes and soft pretzels, all of it. Worst accent in the world, which I've trained myself mostly not to have, because if I spoke like that, I'd be Jim Goad, who knows Adobe Photoshop 3.0, and I'm going to go down the ocean and smoke some dope. You can't sound intelligent with a Philadelphia accent. It's just collision south in New York. In movies, they always try to give them a New York accent. It's only 90 miles away. It's a totally different accent. I think it's called the Tidewater accent. It goes from like Asbury Park, New Jersey, down to maybe Alexandria, Virginia, like just south of D.C., and then it becomes a Southern accent. But it's a vile, vile accent. They never hide.
William F. Buckley, he had a Tidewater accent, and he sounded very intelligent.
Or is it the transatlantic accent? Or is that called
transatlantic? It was a transatlantic accent. I forgot.
Yeah, I don't think he spent too much time in Kensington or Fishtown, I can tell you that much.
Yeah.
Even the names, like, those are rough places. Those are, there was a book about Kensington called Whitetown, USA, because Kensington Avenue, where the elevated subway ran, that was kind of the racial dividing line. And Kensington was a working class neighborhood from the early 1800s, like just nasty fucking Irish dudes. And there's right under the subway, there was a place called the Starlight Ballroom, and around 81, 82, the Dead Kennedys played there. And some D.C. skinheads came up to start shit with the Philly punks. A little riot broke out, but then the mullet-headed, shirtless, toothless AC/DC Kensington dudes came and just kicked the shit out of everybody. A neighborhood. That's a glorious, but now it's, I think it's mostly Puerto Rican and black, like the whole area is black now.
Oh, Haitian.
But yeah.
I've observed in Westmoreland it's all Haitian. And there's a Polish block, too. I used to do indirect sales knocking on people's doors, and it's a huge Haitian and Polish.
Oh, God. Yeah. I can't imagine doing door-to-door sales in Philly.
Well, I live in a mostly white neighborhood in Mississippi.
Do?
Yeah.
Mississippi, I mean, they talk about Mississippi's the blackest state in the country.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Venture, where you live, is it more redneck or more like suburban?
Where I live?
It's more suburban. I mean, we're not really deep in the country. We're like 20 miles away from Memphis, Tennessee, so not really that far.
Okay. Yeah, I think deeper into Mississippi. And I think it's very black, but it's also a highly polarized state. The Atlanta area is not that way. I've never seen people get along better than they do in Atlanta. Maybe it's that way for the whole South. And I think it makes sense because blacks and whites have lived alongside each other for 300-400 years, whereas in Detroit it might be 50 years. Blacks didn't really come out of the South in numbers until after World War II to take jobs from white union. I mean, they were used as scab laborers, and then, of course, like the bosses caused this fucking resentment. That's, when they talk about immigration or a nation of immigrants, they brought Italians over to bust Irish unions back then. I mean, a lot of times they use immigration to just deflate wages. That's something you can never talk about, though.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, Mississippi, I mean, I've only been through there a couple times. Interesting place, all the red clay and everything.
Well, I'm originally from Memphis, Tennessee, which, to be honest, is kind of a shithole. But
Memphis is rough. I mean, Memphis is scary because I toured the country with Hank Williams III in 2007, and my band was from Portland. We went up from Atlanta to meet them there. We practiced for a few days before going on tour, but Memphis is, that's one of the roughest towns in the U.S.
Only Detroit is worse than us.
Detroit, good.
Yeah, Detroit. I mean, I went there in 1986 looking for horrible neighborhoods because I'm fascinated. I love slums. And wasn't that bad then. Cleveland was kind of worse than Detroit, but Detroit's definitely taken a nosedive since. I mean, as far as bad neighborhoods, I'd say Gary, Indiana, or the South Bronx in the 80s and 70s. There's a part of Atlanta that's just west of downtown called the Bluff. That's where, like, the hair on your neck stands on it. It's just so quiet and, like, everything's dead. Like, you just expect zombies to come out. And Camden, New Jersey's that way.
Oh, yeah,
A lot of
Camden's
the really shitty ones around Philly, like Chester, Pennsylvania, has always been notoriously bad. Like, it's always...
Yeah.
Yeah, and Camden is like they'll run at you and throw rocks at your car.
Yeah.
You know, New York used to be a bad city to live in.
New York's not.
Back in the 80s and 90s, but
It's not bad
not
now.
anymore.
70s especially, and like I mean with the trash strike, and you look at pictures. There was a guy, I think Bruce Davison was his name. He did a book called East 103rd Street. He had pictures of Harlem back in the 60s and 70s, and you look at pictures of the Bronx from the 70s. It looks like Dresden after World War II.
Oh,
Yeah, because, I've watched the movies from that time period. I don't know if you know who Ralph Bakshi is,
oh
but
yeah.
he made a movie.
Yeah.
He made a movie called Heavy Traffic, and, it was about New York in the 70s, and, there were, like, pimps and prostitutes, drug dealers, and the mafia were beating up people and
Oh,
everything.
yeah, look at Midnight Cowboy, which is the only X-rated movie ever to win Best Picture, or Taxi Driver. It was hell on earth. And there were scenes that Scorsese cut out of Taxi Driver because they were considered too controversial. Like I think like black kids threw rocks at Travis's cabin and stuff. They just took them out. But yeah, New York.
Originally, the pimp in a Taxi Driver by Schrader was intended to be black, but they changed it to be more politically correct.
Oh yeah.
Weird to make a movie like to even feel that compulsion with a movie like that. Why not just go balls to the wall?
Yeah.
But I think it's even seemed worse in Midnight Cowboy. There's some like just incidental scenes.
Or Death Wish was a classic one of just going balls out.
Right.
But
Yeah. I remember my parents, in Philly. We're talking from Philly. They went up to New York for a weekend and just came back horrified in 73. Yeah. When I think Mayor Lindsay in the late 60s, he thought he was going to bring everyone together, but it just, the crime
Philly's
went.
pretty bad today. I mean, some of the temple's terrible. It's like there'll be guys robbing the professors. I mean, you just walk off. So everybody has to go in group, and it's really right next to, I don't know. But yeah, it's pretty much, I could say for Philly, it's the flash mob central. Tons of flash mobs that are fun. Knockout games.
I was a taxi driver during college, and without fail, the worst neighborhoods in Philly were always the Puerto Rican ones. I'm not sure why that was, but they were the real. You get down near Frankfurt and Lehigh. That's Puerto Rican neighborhood. It's just terrifying. I was there like last year, and it's really bad.
Yep. Yeah, that's when I was.
Yeah, but I've heard that. I mean, that's true with Harlem. The black part of Harlem is actually considered a lot trendier. Like the Puerto Rican part, like Spanish Harlem's considered them traditionally been the worst.
The
Yeah,
South
like-
Bronx was
That's funny because, Dave Chappelle was telling a story about one time where he went to the hood. I think it was probably in Philly or something. And he said he knew it was the hood because there was a child standing outside at 3 o'clock in the morning and there were burnt out buildings everywhere.
right. And the babies there selling weed, right? I remember that. Yeah, God, I'm not sure what happened to him. He, to his credit, he walked away from the biggest deal in television history because he didn't want to be told what to do. Yeah, it's fucking hilarious. And I don't know if you ever saw Chocolate News with David Alan Grier. That was even better than David Alan Grier is just a genius, like so talented as an actor. And that only lasted a season, but that was like in 2008. That was even better than.
Oh yeah, I saw that when it was out on television around that time.
Yeah, it's fantastic. But they killed it.
Yeah.
We are at the end of the show. I would like to thank Jim Goad for being on. It's been an excellent show. Check out his new book, The New Church Ladies.
Thank you, RS Logo. I'm still not convinced you're human, but okay.
And also thanks Pilleater and Adventure Kid.
It's always nice.
You're
talking
welcome.
to you, Jim. Bye-bye.
God bless you. All right.
All right.